anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly. Today I'm going to share with you the tragic case of family violence that was committed against a young Australian woman, Samantha Fraser. Prior to our dark tale, though, we always have our question. So, Sam, what's that today?
Hopefully this will be much more lighthearted than our case today. But my question is actually posed by my mom. And it is, what is your favorite Halloween costume you ever had?
That's a good answer because, as we know, it's almost spooky season.
We're so close to it.
I think my favorite Halloween costume, no lie, was the homemade Sailor Moon costume my mom made me.
Oh, nice.
She did a really good job. Like, she dyed a pair of cowboy boots red. She worked real hard on it. And I would say that's my favorite.
That is awesome.
What about you? You have some iconic Halloween photos I've seen.
I do. I'm so lucky growing up because my grandmother is a very, very talented seamstress. So every year it was whatever we wanted, she had the talent to make. But I would say one of the most entertaining certainly was, I was a Beanie Baby one year. So my grandma it looked exactly like one of the dog Beanie Babies. Mm-hmm. It was like the tan one with the brown ears. And my mom made a big TY tag that hung off one of the ears. And she was like laminated. It looked exactly like it.
That is so cute. That is adorable.
There might be a photo somewhere. I don't know. I'll see if there's one around that I'll post. But there's a good possibility we don't have a photo anymore.
We have now documented its existence, though. So,
well, a lot of our photos got damaged. Mm-hmm. So it literally may just be gone forever, and it's just a memory.
It's okay. We can everybody visualize Sam in the Beanie Baby costume right now. Everybody do
it. Yeah, I was like 10.
Because it was
perfect.
It's gonna be a lot better than what we have to go on right now.
Right. Yeah, if I have one, we'll put it on Instagram.
Yeah. So are you ready to hear about this piece of trash?
I am. You were texting me angry things all day.
I'm mad.
But I know nothing. So I'm excited to hear.
I'm mad. I mean, I'm usually mad. If you listen to the podcast by now, you probably know that I'm usually mad. I'm mad. Mad today.
That's kind of our job at this point.
Mad today. So we're going to start right at the top of this episode. I would like to place a trigger warning. This episode contains discussion of rape, suicide, family violence, and sustained domestic abuse. If you've been a victim of any of these scenarios, I submit to you that there is help in the form of national organizations such as RAINN for sexual violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline for more general concerns, and the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, all of which we will include in our notes. However, if you choose to listen to Samantha's story, please use your discretion and protect yourself from any triggering content.
All right. Yeah, those hotlines are so beneficial.
They're great. They're great. And we are going to link them all. I have them all ready to go because they are very important. And in fact, I realized something that I should do, which is look up Australian local services. So I will do that as well and link those.
It's a good idea.
I will look up some Australian local services as this is an Australian case. Those are U.S. resources, though they may be available internationally. I will check on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're international or not. It's a good question.
Yeah, we'll check it out, and I'll make sure that where it's linked in our Instagram and our Anchor and that kind of thing, we can find some local services and or if those that we've provided are internationally usable. So not much survives about the childhood of Samantha Fraser, and we'll get to the why of that as the story unfolds. But there's also not a lot about her abuser, her ex husband, Adrian Basham. I will also not be providing information on Fraser's children, as it seemed in all the articles and court proceedings that they chose to stay anonymous. They were also very young minors when this crime occurred.
That's fair. If they didn't have involvement, it's better to leave them out of the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's so sad that they were so young when this happened that they had to make that kind of decision. Like, do I talk to the press or not? When you're 7,
Oh, that's so young.
it's horrible, and we'll talk a little more about it. Samantha Fraser was just 38 years old and a trained psychologist when her ex-husband would take her life. And I can only imagine being trapped in a relationship like the one we will describe today as a trained psychologist. You would be well aware of the danger you were in.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm sure you'll get to it, but the danger of getting out of those relationships is usually the most dangerous part of them.
Exactly.
And I'm sure she is well aware of that
Exactly.
in this process of her training and everything.
No, exactly, Sam. That's a good point that you raised. That is the most dangerous phase, and unfortunately, that is very applicable to this case. Adrian James Basham was 42 when he murdered Samantha, and he was known as a fly-in, fly-out construction worker. And I didn't know what this was. So this is a worker.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was, so I Googled. And this is a worker who would be out of town for typically 2 weeks and then would have the equivalent amount of time off. So he would go out, be a construction worker for 2 weeks, fly home, and be there for 2 weeks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess we could say he's home maybe half the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a fair assumption. After Samantha's first marriage lasted just a year due to her husband's infidelity, she met Adrian Basham in 2006 through mutual friends. I don't have many details on Samantha and Adrian's relationship prior to the bitter divorce, as it was ongoing during the time of the crime. Like Sam just said, it's the most dangerous amount of time. Samantha was attempting to separate and desperately wanted a divorce from Basham. In 2018, when the crime occurred, Samantha shared 3 children with Basham. And like I said, they were very young. They were just 5, 7, and 9 when their father would murder their mother.
And that's so much because obviously they're losing their mother in this.
Yes.
But they're also losing their father through all of this.
Absolutely. These poor children, they're so young and they're losing everything. It's not fair. None of these stories we tell are...
They're young, but they're old enough to remember, too. Like, that's awful.
That is awful. And I know that none of the stories we tell are fair, but I've just been feeling that a lot lately. Like, this isn't fair. And Samantha's story is not fair. And Samantha's story is so many other people's stories. I get on my soapbox here a couple times, so I'll spare you all it now and go on. But this problem is an epidemic. 2014 was quite possibly the first time that Samantha thought of leaving their marriage, as this year marks the first in a series of allegations of rape against Basham brought by Samantha. Again, here, trigger warning, guys. She said he first raped her in 2014 while she was grabbing food out of their pantry. I even put it in here. This will get a little graphic as I go on here, folks. So skip ahead, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 45, if you don't want to hear the grim details of what Samantha had to live with. Crown prosecutor Nanette Rogers revealed the terrifying ordeal to the court. quote, "The accused, Basham, locked the door of the pantry from the inside and undid Samantha's jeans, and he had sexual intercourse with her. He then unlocked the pantry and left." Which is unconscionable. Like, how could you harm someone so traumatically like this, who you've been married to and is the mother of your children?
Yeah, and at this point, you said they met in 2016. They've been together for 8 years.
Right.
And, like, that's so much to...
They
It probably felt like a very sudden change in their relationship at this point.
actually, no, they met in 2006.
Oh, did I say 2006, 16?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2006 to 2014. So that's 8 years.
Yeah.
That they were together
Yeah,
at that point.
exactly.
Like that has to feel like such a crazy
Oh my God.
change in your relationship.
Absolutely.
And there's also like the balance of, and like modern day times, I think that the mindset on this is incredibly different. And even in 2014, it's probably fairly similar to today. But being in a marital relationship with somebody, a lot of people don't understand that rape can absolutely exist.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Sam. That is another good reason. Well, I don't want to pat myself. I don't want to break my arm patting myself on the back, but I picked this one because it does happen. It happens all the time, and people don't think about it is the thing.
Yeah, and it's equally as unacceptable as any other category of rape.
Absolutely. It's equally as unacceptable. And I can't imagine what a crazy, like, after 8 years of being with somebody, 3 kids, I can't imagine what, like, a violation that must feel like and be.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to imagine, but it is an absolute violation.
Yeah.
Even between somebody that you have vowed to stand by their side for ideally the rest of your life.
Yeah, and in even like smaller things, you were just going to get food out of the pantry.
Right?
So he attacked you. And so that's why I said that this could quite possibly be the first time that she thought she had to go. And Rogers, who I'll remind you is the Crown Prosecutor, Nanette, Crown Prosecutor, equal in this case to like head prosecutor here in America. And Rogers went on to explain that Basham had raped Samantha again that very same year, only this time as she slept in their bed. And
Oh, wow.
this is grim, guys, so hold on to your strap in. Ms. Rogers stated, quote, "He ejaculated, rolled over, and fell asleep, and she got out of the bed," end quote.
Oh, God. Like, again, you can't even imagine
I can't
what
even
that's like.
And it's disgusting because he clearly thought so little of it that he just rolled over and went to bed.
It's what's going through his head, and that's all that matters.
Exactly.
Like, she doesn't matter in any way in this situation, in his mind.
You have read Adrian Basham very well. You have read him very well because we will see that come back. And then unfortunately, we have to talk about a third awful, heinous, sexually violent attack that would occur against Samantha by Basham in 2016. Well, Samantha was fast asleep again in their bed. Rogers stated for the court, quote, "She froze for a moment before pushing him off, and she said to the accused, quote, 'You can't do that. I was asleep. That is rape,' end quote. Then Samantha left the room to sleep elsewhere in the home. Unfortunately, this bravery in the face of these attacks would only stoke Basham's fury against her.
See, like, that's what I was thinking. Like, I want to sit here and cheer and, like, yes, you need to say this. You need to stand up for yourself because it's not okay what's happening to you. That's also so terrifying because
Because
like as you said, that just can make them angrier.
yes. And this one was particularly notable for me because she says to him what he's done, and he doesn't seem to have any problem with it. She goes to sleep somewhere else in the house, and he doesn't seem to have any problem with it. It's just wild to me.
Yeah, it's like they're like, okay, I guess this time it didn't work. I'll just try again later.
Yeah, like, oh well. She didn't have that good a time. I bet she will next time. Like, what?
Oh, I don't think he's even, from just the couple things we've talked about, I don't think it's even going into that. There's no consideration for her.
No.
In this.
No, you're right. Not really. So in later court testimony, Debbie Mahone, who was Samantha's friend of 20 years, which, oh, that's so sad. She lost her friend of 20 years. Like, this was a woman who had children. She had friends who loved her, but we will hear more about them, so I will carry on and not get too caught up. Debbie said that she herself witnessed the terrifying behavior of Adrian James Basham in September of 2016. She drove past the couple's 5-acre block on Smith's Beach, Phillip Island. This is in Australia again. She told the court that Basham was irate because Samantha had gone on a run instead of helping him plant trees on the block. Mahone said, quote, "He just lost it. I was on the way to the beach with the surfboard in the back. I wound down the window. He was swearing, carrying on, doing hand gestures, pointing. He was just furious, dropping the F-bomb and the C-bomb. He was almost out of control," end quote.
Yeah, there's not an excuse for that. Like, there isn't.
No. Personally, for me, anytime the C-bomb is dropped around me, I behave with hockey rules, which is you get 15 minutes in the penalty box for a C-bomb.
I like that.
If you drop 15-minute penalty. Like, you don't talk for 15.
Right. But, like, they're even, okay, like, just given the example of, okay, they had agreed to plant trees together, and let's say she forgot and went on a run. Mm-hmm. That behavior still isn't justified.
No.
In that.
It's wild that you would be behaving so lividly and, like, so agitatedly that somebody in a passing car would wind down their window and be like,
right,
yo, what's up? You know, and tragically, Miss Mahone told the court that it was just, quote, a glimpse as to what she must have been encountering, meaning Samantha.
Yeah, usually, like, a passerby, whether it's a friend or not, it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more underneath that that's happening.
Exactly. And after this incident, Miss Mahone did what I think was the right thing as a friend. She called Samantha and discussed with her ways that she could end this relationship. She stated, quote, "I told her, you need to go. We need to work out a plan so that you can separate."
Yeah, because sometimes you just need help. Like, as we were saying earlier, this can be the most dangerous time of an abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. That sometimes it is impossible to do it alone, or feels like it's impossible to do it alone. So having somebody by your side is important if you have that ability.
Exactly.
And whether it's through one of those hotlines that you mentioned or a friend, like, mm-hmm. both can go such a long way.
That's why I think Debbie did the right thing, like calling her after seeing that I'm glad she called her and told her. I mean, imagine how she would have felt had she not done that. You know, you want to feel...
That's exactly what I was thinking. I can't imagine being in this sort of situation, seeing a friend go through this. Mm-hmm. Like, I've had some friends go through some really tough times, but a lot of times it was like I found out the details after mm-hmm. the fact. But I can't imagine being in that situation where I'm actually witnessing this
Right. Unfolds.
and not doing anything about it. That would be too much for me, and I'm not the one in that position.
Exactly. Like, you want to feel like you did everything, and I think Debbie really did, because she told her you need to get out, and that's not the path we take. It brings us to February 23rd, 2017, and we're going to meet a man named Terry Melvin, who is a now retired psychologist. On this date, he had his first counseling session with Basham and Samantha. He would tell the court that he had observed evidence of Basham's controlling and manipulative behavior, intimidation, financial control, and one episode of physical violence in the marriage. Quote, "She said he had pushed her and she was fearful of leaving," end quote, according to Mr. Melvin.
Yeah, I can understand how scary that idea is to walk away, because it's so much more than just you leaving. Like, you're married. It is you're financially tied together. You have children together. I totally understand that. How incredibly terrifying that has to be.
It's got to feel you must feel so trapped. It's awful. And he pushed her. Like, if Adam, my husband, the mad artisan, who you've heard me discuss in the past, Adam knows this now. Many people who are my friends know this about me. I do not even like when someone raises their voice to me. So the idea of a husband pushing his wife is nuts to me.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, that's not anything that I grew up with in my home, which is something I feel very lucky to be able to say. But it's never anything I've experienced. It's never anything I've experienced firsthand with any of my friends. No. But I can't imagine that. And I feel so bad being like, I can't imagine, but I know how it has to be absolutely terrible. Like, those two things aren't exactly the same thing, but I would like to do everything I can. I think that's the reason we talk about this. Yeah. Is to bring awareness that there's help and there's options.
Exactly. There are options. There are things to do. There are multiple ways. We call a lot of these things hotlines, but they're not just hotlines anymore, you guys. A lot of them now offer texting options. A lot of them offer live chat options, and
they're resources.
Yes, yeah. Melvin said that the couple met with him 6 times for counseling, and it included one session that was so bad that Samantha had a panic attack and had to leave the room during one of the entire sessions. Yeah. Mr. Melvin noted that he was concerned that Mr. Basham would become vindictive and make life difficult for Miss Fraser. Sam is frightened about what Adrian will do. End quote. That appears in Melvin's dated notes from April 19th, 2017.
Like, I don't want to understand it, but I also am, like, trying to think of, okay, how can you sit there when you're going through counseling and your wife is having a panic attack? Like, how can you sit there and seemingly assume that's fine? I just, like, none of it makes sense to me.
Right. Like,
that seems to be acceptable in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Like, I'm not culpable for that at all. Who cares? Like,
yeah, that's her problem. Whatever. Like, no, it's not.
Exactly.
You are a partnership. You have chosen to do that by getting married.
Exactly.
There's actual paperwork to, like, show that you're doing that.
There's paperwork here. And Melvin also told the court that Basham had maintained his farcical story that Miss Fraser was responsible for their separation, and he would justify and blame away any of his part in it.
Well, you know what? She is responsible in the way that she's not dealing with you anymore, and she's standing up for herself.
Right.
That's the only responsibility you can give her.
Oh, right.
And she deserves that.
She deserves that, yeah. But he is saying it's all on her. And I saw some things in some sources. I saw some things that are trying to defend this garbage truck of a man. And they're like, well, he was worried about the kids and the kids' situation, and there's nothing to support that she was going to keep the children from him. There was nothing even being discussed about like that yet.
And in addition, and again, maybe I'm not the best person to be speaking on this because my parents are still together. But I've seen a lot of friends go through divorce with their parents, and their lives were better. Their home lives were happier, and I've had some go through difficult times as well. Like, it's definitely a balance, and it's not easy in any regard.
Right.
But when you are so unhappy
Yes.
with your partner, and it can impact your kids so easily without you ever knowing it.
Absolutely.
And when you separate, you can have happier home lives.
Yeah.
And be able to enjoy your life and your kids enjoy their lives more.
Yeah, especially considering they are so young. If I'm not mistaken, it was 5, 7, and 9. You still have so much. I mean, in theory, in a great world, you still have so much time with these kids to create a happy home and show them what a loving relationship is, and you chose not to do any of that.
And the younger the kid, usually the easier their ability to adapt to a new situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so hopefully in a situation like that, when kids are so young, it becomes the new normal fairly quickly.
So it's not anybody. It's a two-way street, but Basham won't be admitting to any fault on his part, and Melvin considered him an implied threat, though he presented as very reasonable and calm, which I think is notable. If a psychiatrist is saying, like, no, this dude he's definitely a threat. He just doesn't look like it.
And unfortunately, I think that's pretty common.
I think so, too.
Because everything's kind of behind closed doors.
A Supreme Court of Victoria jury then heard in August 2017 that Basham had been facing rape charges against Samantha. This was initially kept back from the media due to a gag order, which was imposed upon by the Daily Mail. And you can take the Daily Mail for what it is, but if they're one thing, they're persistent. So it gets out.
That's true.
Yeah, so it gets out, it leaks that this piece of shit, Adrian Basham, is charged with raping Samantha during their marriage repeatedly. She was to give the court evidence on the multiple charges of rape against him the next week. She was murdered just a week before she was due to testify.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
So
bad.
what was... Okay, so, like, you've already said that she's been murdered by her husband. So, like, that's not a secret at this point in our episode. What do you think that's going to do for you?
Right.
You can either go to prison for rape charges, which
Right.
is probably a lot less than the murder charges that you're now going to get.
Right. And you could just get a divorce and do your time and get on with it, but that wasn't how it was going to go. And
Exactly. Wow.
yeah, 1 week.
And those rape charges don't necessarily go away. Like, they unfortunately could be dropped if there's not her testimony, if they don't have the evidence for it. But it's not guaranteed that you'll also lose those rape charges that you
Yeah.
have on you.
Yeah. And yeah, so just 7 days, 1 whole week before she was to testify, he murdered her. And he was facing the multiple charges of raping Samantha both in 2014 and 2016, though all the details of the crimes had been suppressed by a lower magistrate's court. This was all brought to light by Supreme Court Justice Leslie Taylor. So she brings this before this is the first time they're examining this as well in relation to the case. July 22nd, 2018 would be a day riddled with emotion for Samantha. She was celebrating her birthday, but was also petrified of her ex. I think her friends describe it the best, so we'll hear from them about the event. And it was just the night before her ex-husband would brutally murder her. And guests said that they attended the impromptu party at her house to celebrate Samantha turning 38. She was 38 years old.
That's so young still. Like,
I know.
Like, we're not terribly far off from that age.
No, 38.
Like, it feels so young.
Yeah. And it was said by friends that at this point, Fraser was so close to finalizing her divorce from Basham. Friend Lydia Matthews told the court, quote, "She seemed happy but fragile. She was happy that all of her friends were around, but she was so petrified of that monster over there," Miss Matthews said, indicating Basham seated in the dock.
Just the relief that she has to feel, but then on top of it, knowing that he's still there.
Yeah.
Like, different place, but he's still there.
And Lydia said that Samantha was, quote, terrified of what was going to happen. She thought this outcome was going to happen. Lydia also described Samantha as, quote, petrified, and said that she had lost a lot of weight, which is so tragic that Samantha felt the foreshadowing of her killing and had to live her life with her 3 young children in that fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and then also just having your friend tell you that she's scared of this. Like, that's just, you have to, like, you obviously know your friend. If your friend's willing to say that to you, you obviously know them very well. You're very close with them.
Yes.
And to have that recognition that, like, she just said that to me out loud means that you know she's been thinking about it for a long time and how heavy that has to be on her.
Exactly. And Samantha was so obviously affected by this fear that she and her neighbor had devised a safety plan. If anything were to happen, quote, "If the children needed to get out of the house, they could run to my house." And this was through a vacant lot adjoining her property to her neighbor, Ashley Brown.
I'm glad she had that.
Yes, Samantha made this agreement with Ashley Brown that the children would run to her property if anything happened, which is awful.
And I've heard of people having things like this. Not necessarily for this sort of situation, but I've heard it before with, like, children of special needs with siblings. Obviously, it's such a huge variety of different things that special needs can impact in a family. But, like, just the conversation of a parent being like, if you are scared because you don't understand, like, go to the car and lock the doors.
Right.
Like, I've heard of things like that before, where it's just like, if you don't understand and you're scared and you don't know what to do, this can make you feel safe, and this is an option for you. I've definitely heard of that sort of thing before.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the fear that she felt was well-founded. On July 23rd, 2018, Lydia Matthews shared with the court that she had seen her friend on the morning of her murder. She said that they had had coffee together after both dropped their children off at school. Samantha told Lydia that she had an informal interview at Bass Coast Healthcare Center that morning, which she seemed to be excited about. And at 11:36 a.m., Lydia stated in court that she called Samantha to see how her interview went, but there was no answer from her friend.
Oh, so it was, like, quick that morning, unfortunately.
Yeah, Lydia had just saw her. And then Samantha was also scheduled to attend a counseling session at noon, but never showed.
Well, Yeah, and that's just like that's such a close friend thing to do to see how your interview went.
Yeah, you said you
Like
were.
you and I have done that before.
Yeah, exactly. Like that thing we talked about at breakfast. How'd it go? You know, like
Exactly.
she was just checking in. And here's how screwed up it gets. I can't believe it. It's Samantha's brutal assault and murder occurred in Cowes, a community on Phillip Island, Australia. Samantha returned home from dropping off her three children at school, where she was assaulted by Basham in the garage of the home they had once shared when they were married. Basham left 41 separate blunt force injuries on her.
Wow.
41.
Like I know like a lot of the true crime shows and things they to like emphasize the point of how many that is. It's basically like count to 41 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you might be in the general ballpark of the time frame it takes then. And that's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be suffering blunt force injuries that whole time. And then it gets even worse. Basham then concocted the plot that he would make it appear that Samantha had taken her own life.
You with 41 separate rooms you can't. Like no way.
Right. Wait till you hear. Wait till you hear how he tries. He's such a scrub. I hate him. He wanted it to appear like she had taken her own life, so he tied a noose around her neck and hung her from the garage door at her home, staging the scene for the authorities.
Like I don't have words because
I know.
It's like your ego has to be so high to think that that's even a possibility to get away with this.
Right. Like, oh, I'm totally fine. That'll be good. Like, they won't suspect a thing. Are you kidding me? Come on now.
And like, what? Okay, so he shows up in her garage. So either they do have a conversation that we just don't know about because they were the only two people there, which is entirely possible. But then to lead to this, like, truly, what's your end game?
Yeah, I can tell you that the judge does have an opinion on that, upon whether or not a conversation occurred. And
oh, interesting. Okay, because
Yes.
it's like in all likelihood, it's hard, you can't tell. Like you don't really know. Did he go in to ambush her, and was that premeditated?
Right.
And I don't know the Australian, like if they have first degree, second degree, like we do, but that makes a difference here in the States.
The judge has an opinion on both of those things, and
I'm interested to hear that.
yes, it's good. Samantha's body was later discovered when the school observed that Fraser had failed to pick up her children. Police were notified and discovered Samantha at 5:05 p.m. after forcing entry to the home. Samantha's bloody and bruised body was found by police with a rope tied around her neck and a stepladder kicked over beside her. Samantha's handbag remained on the front seat of the car next to her cell phone.
Which that's just, like, again, he's not thinking through any of this. But
no, exactly.
It's a bizarre looking scene when you, in comparison. Well, I shouldn't even say that because everyone's different, and
right.
People who feel the need to do that, and you don't know what state they're in. You don't know if it's like I need to get home now, or if it's super well thought out.
Right.
Like everyone's just so different, and
right.
it's just, as a whole, it's so awful.
Yeah, and I just think it's telling that her handbag and her phone were still on the front seat.
Yeah, like it seems not normal.
And you know what else isn't normal? The most disgusting thing that I'm about to tell you. According to his testimony, Basham claimed Samantha was alive after he assaulted her and must have committed suicide after he left and he pled not guilty.
Oh.
He admits to attacking and assaulting her and leaving her for dead, but it's not his fault she died. Oh, no.
Yeah, no. Like, no way. That's the only defense he can give.
That ain't
because
it.
clearly she's like there's no way that it hit the beating, the blunt force injuries that he gave her doesn't show up on her autopsy.
Oh.
So that's the only thing that he can say
Yeah.
to then put in that not guilty plea without it looking so absolutely so much like he's lying in that that much of a way.
Exactly. It's so disgusting. It's so disgusting. Like, oh yeah, I assaulted her, but when I left, she wasn't dead. Like, oh.
Yeah, you're charging me with murder. This isn't on the table, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Like, in that case, you get a gold star. Good job. Like, what? And so on August 2nd, 2018, Adrian Basham was arrested and charged with Samantha's murder. Crown Prosecutor Nanette Rogers offered to the jury that Samantha had been terrified of how Basham would react to her confronting him at court about the upcoming rape case. Rogers stated, quote, "It's inconceivable that Adrian Basham was unaware that on July 30th, Samantha Fraser was required to give evidence." End quote.
Oh, yeah. Like,
he knew.
Absolutely, he knows.
He knows.
He knew that he had a few days left before he'd have to go through this process. But you know what? You're still sitting in the same process.
Right.
Like,
right.
You're going through the same thing. You just have a few more things added to your charges.
Yeah. And Rogers summed it up neatly, saying, quote, "The prosecution case is that he killed her to prevent her from giving evidence against him about the rape charges at the committal hearing on July 30th, 2018 at Latrobe Valley Magistrates Court, 7 days away."
Yeah, absolutely.
Very neatly put.
Yeah. Yeah, just now we're adding a few more charges and a handful of more decades to your time in prison. Hopefully, a handful more decades minimum.
Yeah. I thought that was very well summed up. And in October of 2018, interviews were beginning to be held with those who knew Basham. Legia Matthews' husband, Peter, made a statement to the police that he had been friends with Mr. Basham and that they would surf and shoot together. Defense barrister Peter Kilduff asked him, "You were friends?" And Peter responded, quote, "Yes, as much as it irks me to say so," end quote.
Yeah, like he's realizing how terrible he was to his wife.
Exactly.
But he's being honest, which is the important part.
Yeah. Peter would also tell the court at trial that Basham spoke about money so much and its importance to the point where Peter got the impression that it was, quote, more important than the well-being of his wife and that of his children, end quote.
Yeah, based on what their therapist said earlier, that seems to add up to me.
Yeah. Peter also said he was often to bring up, quote, the cost of things, how much the kids were going to cost him, end quote, to which I would counter, don't have children, especially if you intend to violently attack their mother.
Yeah, like...
Oh, the kids, these kids are going to cost me so much, these kids, like, listen.
When you go into parenthood, you know that your funds are going to be so much more limited than they ever were because kids are very expensive throughout their life.
Yeah, children are associated with a certain cost, and you had 3 of them with your wife who you purportedly loved. Like, why are you going around telling people then what an inconvenience they are to you?
Yeah. Like, I don't like this guy.
No. Peter also shared with the court disturbing stories of Basham, with the first being that he said he wanted to, quote, cripple Samantha financially for leaving him. Quick side note here. This is a form of domestic abuse called financial abuse. The forms of financial abuse may be subtle or overt, but but in general include tactics to conceal information, limit the victim's access to assets, or reduce accessibility to the family finances. Financial abuse, along with emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, includes behaviors to intentionally manipulate, intimidate, and threaten the victim in order to entrap that person into the relationship. And in some cases, financial abuse is present throughout the relationship. And in other cases, financial abuse becomes present when the survivor is attempting to leave or has left the relationship, as we've talked a little bit about here. And if you or anyone you know is struggling with financial abuse, preventing them from leaving a partner, there is help. You can reach out. Once again, we're gonna link the call, the chat, the text to the domestic violence support line. All of this falls under that. And Mr. Matthews said that he was so disturbed by this conversation he had with Basham and subsequent ones about crippling her financially and this sort of thing, that he wrote a letter to Detective Senior Constable Simon Fisher, quote, to try to voice my concerns about Sam's welfare based on the comments Adrian was making.
So was this before, was this during divorce proceedings and the rape testimony? Or is this after her murder that he's writing this letter?
Oh, it's during the proceedings because he's quote unquote friends with them and with Adrian. And then during these, as these divorce proceedings comes up, and he starts to talk about like crippling her financially, and it just said subsequent conversations, so probably more troubling information. He wrote the letter then. And so this would be...
Well, that's fantastic if he wrote it in her defense to make sure that this doesn't happen to her within her divorce.
He did.
Like, I would understand if it was after the fact, because it seems like things happened very quickly here.
Well, yeah, he testifies to it too, but he, very, very astutely said that he was so disturbed that his quote was, he wanted to voice his concerns about her welfare.
It really sounds like Samantha's friends really had her back. And
Exactly.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. And Peter also testified that Basham was, quote, super competitive, and that he had witnessed him take a call in November of 2017 where he was said to have become, quote, completely aggressive, completely manic. And finally, this is a long list. This is one human's encounters with him. The month that Samantha was murdered by Basham, Mr. Matthews stated that he was part of a shouting match with Basham in the ocean as the two surfed at Phillip Island. He said Basham, quote, pursued me aggressively in the surf in front of 30 other people, he said to the court.
This guy just really has rage issues when he doesn't get his way.
Yes.
Like this is what it all seems to come back to, is he's slightly inconvenienced or wants something so badly, he will do anything and hurt anyone in his path to get it.
Absolutely. So trial began October 17th, 2019. Samantha's friends and her psychologist that was treating her gave testimony at trial that Basham was controlling and dominant in his behavior over his wife. And this is where we get a little background into the environment Samantha was raised in, and potentially even some of the reasons she had been afraid to leave a marriage. Debbie Mahone told the court that Samantha was the first member of her family to ever leave their small religious sect. Miss Mann went on to describe to the Latrobe Valley Magistrates Court the cult as causing stress within the family. She said, quote, she, Samantha, was the first to step out of that and then her mom followed, but she said enough's enough.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And Debbie Mahan would have likely known Samantha was at her breaking point. After 20 years of friendship, they met at university. She attended Samantha's first wedding at Riddles Creek, north of Melbourne. And Debbie expounded upon Samantha's upbringing, but a lot of it was speculative. Samantha seems to have kept this part of her life quieter. However, she said when she had met Samantha at school, her friend had, quote, occasionally spoken about leaving a cult she had been in during her childhood.
Yeah, I imagine that's one of those things where you don't want to talk about it because you just don't want to answer all the questions because
No.
inevitably anyone's going to be curious
Yeah,
and they're going to want to know.
absolutely.
But if you just don't tell anybody, you can kind of control that.
Yeah, and
But
it-
you want people in your life to know your life.
And it makes me so sad that she would have been in a situation where she was controlled and abused like this when she was younger and when she was older and married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so unfair. Mahan said she wasn't sure which cult it was, but she stated that it was, quote, a bit old school. Mahan confirmed that Samantha was, quote, disowned by a lot of the extended family, from what I understood.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's an awful spot to be in now because she is isolated with her abuser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she doesn't have, like, luckily she has these handful of friends that seem fantastic, but you can't go home to family at that point,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right. It was just she had stepped out and then her mom had stepped out of the cult. I didn't see any further information in any of the sources I checked about her mother's life and what she did afterward, but
Mm-hmm.
it's an awful spot that she was disowned, but I agree with you. I think that's fairly common.
Yeah, because a lot of times in these sorts of cults that are so controlling like this is you don't want outside influence. Well, if you have
No.
somebody who leaves and is still talking to their family members, that's an immediate outside influence that they trust.
Right. And they can't control. Yeah, and
Exactly.
psychologist of 25 years testifying for Samantha, Terry Melvin, confirmed his notes contained reference to the 2x2s, which is a religious Christian cult. He also testified that he believed that this was the environment Samantha was raised in. The 2x2s are sometimes referred to as the Truth or Friends and Workers. The sect has seen multiple leaders face accusations of child sexual abuse, some of which are still currently playing out in the legal system.
Wow. So this sounds like it's been around for a long time if they've had multiple leaders.
Yes. Yeah. Or it's been particularly egregious that they've been getting arrested and had to replace new leaders.
Right. But that means that they're strong enough to
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
do that,
If
yeah.
it was a smaller cult, your leader's gone, it could easily
Right.
dissolve.
Yeah, it would fall apart. Yeah. A former member, Laura McConnell, who was born into the fundamentalist Christian sect like Samantha, told the reporter, quote, "It is of utmost importance to them that they do not have an official name or headquarters or a centrally identifiable presence anywhere on Earth." Laura also stated the group is highly secretive and should be classified as it is a cult.
And you know what's just so scary about that is they have to be aware that they're a cult at that point. If you're trying to hide everything about you, you know what you're doing is not right.
Exactly. You know what you're doing is wrong. If you're trying to hide all that.
Yeah.
Terry Melvin, who we've mentioned, was a prominent character in the psychiatric elements of this case. as he had counseling sessions with Basham and Fraser, both as a couple, but also individually. Melvin testified, quote, "I suspected there might have been family violence issues." He also told the court Miss Fraser had expressed fear about leaving Basham and was worried he would become vindictive, which was not an entirely unfounded fear for poor Samantha.
Yeah, I think that those were very much grounded in reality, unfortunately.
Melvin also said there was evidence of ongoing controlling behavior and intimidation, social monitoring, financial control, physical intimidation, and, like we said, at least one episode of physical violence. Melvin's notes of Basham said he has, quote, "little capacity for reflection and self-awareness." So like I said, you got him.
Yeah, I feel like if you're taking a psychology or like sociology course, this is like the true textbook definition of like, if they have every single one of these characteristics, you know that they're like, I don't even know, like, with that's a little bit of narcissism, like,
Yeah,
it's kind of like everything combined. It's like, this is truly the textbook definition,
right, of a narcissist.
This guy.
And
well, there's a lot more to it. It's not just narcissism at this point. Like, it's just everything.
It is everything. We will talk a little more about narcissism in relation to this case shortly. But you really hit the nail on the head. This is a trained psychologist saying he has little capacity for reflection and self-awareness. So,
yeah,
this guy doesn't even know he's part of the problem here.
Yeah, he thinks that everyone else is the problem.
Right. So, further experts testified at the trial showing the true battle for her life that Samantha engaged in. DNA evidence revealed during the trial showed Basham's biological material was found underneath both sets of fingernails on Samantha's hands.
So she clearly fought back.
Yes, exactly. They had his DNA on her. And Prosecutor Rogers said, quote, "which is indicative, we say, of her actively struggling with and defending herself against the accused."
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cut and dry. Basham's DNA was also revealed to be on the rope that had been wrapped around Samantha's neck.
Not surprising there.
Yeah, again, not surprising. A forensic expert shared with the court that they had found deep bruising to the left and right fingers and hands of Samantha, which to them suggested punches being thrown by her.
So she really fought back.
Yeah, that kind of breaks my heart that, like, her fingers were bruised from fighting as hard as she could.
Yeah.
You know? And I assume that they highlight this here to show that Samantha is trying to defend herself against her attacker, but is just overpowered. Prosecutors also claimed that Basham tried to cover his tracks by attempting to clean up the bloody crime scene. The prosecution said, quote, "Adrian Basham also wet Samantha Fraser's hair. He wet her hair to remove what he could of her blood. He may well have used her white top to do this, but her hair was wet, and it shouldn't have been." End quote.
Yeah, you're trying to stage something, but you're making it look even more out of place.
Yeah, he's not doing a good job.
Keep not doing a good job, because we're getting a lot of evidence against you, and you deserve to be in prison at this point.
Yeah.
But, like, it's so not thought through, but it seems like he thought it through.
Yeah, it seems like he really thought, like, he was gonna get off and it would be fine. And it's believed that Basham took Samantha's white top with him and fled the scene. CCTV captured him running from the home at 12:04 p.m. Notably, his hood was up and his hands were in his pockets. The video also made it appear as though he had something stuffed up his jacket.
So he was there for a while after he killed her.
Yeah.
Because you said that her friend called it, I think it was 11:34.
Mm-hmm.
So you would assume,
Yeah, he ran.
based on that,
Yeah.
he likely killed her before that. It could be a couple minutes before that, but enough for her not to be able to get to her phone
Yeah.
and answer it to either get help from her friend or call the police.
Right.
So you would assume that, like, minimally, he had probably killed her around 11:30, and he still stayed around for a full half hour staging all of this.
Right, exactly. Putting together what he thinks is the perfect crime scene. And also, I'll just bring it up now because I'm not sure if it's anywhere in the coming details, but I read in multiple sources that he waited in that garage for hours for her to come home. So, like,
Wow.
he was fully committed.
Yeah, that's premeditation.
I read in multiple sources that it was 2 hours he waited in the garage for her to come home so he could do this.
Yeah, because she dropped off her kids and then went and had coffee. So, like, it really could have been quite a while.
Exactly. And here we should mention that Samantha was only about 125 pounds and considerably smaller in height than Basham. I looked everywhere for how tall and how much he weighed. Basham, his measurements. I looked everywhere for him. The only thing I saw him referred to in several places as like the giant man or the giant monster. Apparently he was a very large fellow, but she was considerably smaller than him.
Say 125 pounds. That's pretty small for a woman. It's like on the small side of average to potentially small at that point.
Yeah.
For a lot of women.
Yeah, and I wish I could be more specific about him, but I couldn't find it anywhere, and except in sort of sensationalized things that said like the giant monster. So I was like, okay, well that doesn't help. But so because she was this size, though she fought valiantly, there was no way she could have beaten the man. And from prosecutors, quote, she fought desperately for her life. There was deep bruising to her hands and wrists, consistent with being restrained, and she managed to scratch his nose and or arm, said Rogers, who's the prosecutor. I'm not sure where they pulled these locations from for the scratches, though I imagine Basham's injuries were examined after his arrest.
Yeah, maybe even during the initial questioning right after.
Yeah.
And I'm actually looking at pictures of him. He looks like a pretty tall guy for sure. Mm-hmm. But I'm also, they have pictures of the security footage of him walking out of the house. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, it looks like he's just nonchalantly walking.
Yeah, well, you may be mistaking it for some of the other CCTV footage that I haven't talked about yet.
Oh no, because I wanted to see if I could just see a picture of him and his size.
Yeah, don't worry, there's more. Adrian has more.
Oh no.
So, I assume they saw his scratches when he was taken in. And Rogers went on to say, quote, she, Samantha, suffered rotational force and velocity applied to her head when she was assaulted, and her head was spun round.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
So, yeah, I don't know. That's sort of vague. I hope that doesn't mean, like, what it sounds like. Or if he broke her neck. I don't know.
To me, it sounds like he tried to do a move you see in the movies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
Like that's what it feels like.
Yeah. The jury also heard testimony, though I'm not sure who from, that Basham had repeatedly threatened Fraser with harm and allegedly told her, quote, if I can't have you, no one will. Which I think is the horrific hallmark for all abusers of women.
Yeah.
These men see women as their property, and Samantha was no longer willing to live her life as Basham's wife, so therefore she must die. It seems very much that To Adrian Basham, Samantha did not matter outside of what she did for him. She was his wife and would do whatever it was he wanted, when he wanted, which is why these relationships are so hard to escape once they take root, and which is why we've already brought that up. She didn't matter to him.
Yeah.
Outside of what
Clearly
she did.
not. And he's also now in a position where he's like, well, I need you because you do things for me, and now I'll have to do them myself. Like,
right.
He has to be in that mindset right now too. So it's not only like no one else can have you. It's like, well, you know what? No one else can have you because I need you, but I will never say that ever.
Exactly. Another friend, former psychologist and retired teacher Peta Leroy, would go on regular walks along the beach with Samantha, and the two became close friends. So close that Samantha confided to Peta that she had, quote, picked up some kind of STD from Adrian, quote, and that she had to take a strong course of antibiotics.
So there's a good possibility he's cheating on her if he's
Correct.
giving her STDs
Correct.
within their marriage.
And they're so bad that she also told Peta that if the antibiotic course she was taking didn't work, she could have been looking at the prospect of surgery.
Oh, wow. So he's just really not caring.
No, he's horrible. He's the worst. And Samantha told Peta Leroy that she had not had sex with anyone else during her marriage to Basham.
Yeah, so it's absolutely him bringing them home.
Mm-hmm. Vicky Riley, another of Samantha's friends, said that her fear of Basham was so great that she had gotten sensor lights installed at her home, had the locks changed, and was given a new phone.
Yeah, like, I don't blame her for any of that at all. Mm-hmm. But it's so sad that feels like a requirement when you leave a situation like this.
Right. During the crimes against Samantha, her parents were away on a trip to the United States. Police alleged Basham snuck into the garage as Samantha returned home after meeting with her friends. One source stated, like I said before, that Basham had waited for up to 2 hours inside the garage waiting for her to arrive home to commit the crime. Heartbreakingly, Miss Mahan recounted a desperate quote from Samantha, who said, quote, she said, I don't care about the money. I don't want to rock the boat with anything. I just want to get out of this as quickly as possible so I'm free. All Samantha wanted was her freedom from this predator, and he took that chance from her the minute he was able to.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And you said that she was a psychologist, right? Mm-hmm. So she likely had a pretty decent income. Like, I don't know how...
If she had been working...
The medical field is in Australia. Like, I don't know the pay balance with that. But it's a good possibility she either was making good income or had the potential of making good income without him.
Yeah, she had the potential, but from what I'm thinking is she may not have been working, especially considering all of these financial abuse mentions. Right. I think she may have been.
But she had the education where she could make a decent income for herself as a one-income household.
Yeah, she had the training.
She had that potential.
Yeah, she had the training. Crown Prosecutor Nanette Rogers said during her closing address, quote, the Crown case is that there are several motives in this matter. The primary one being the upcoming court case concerning the rape allegations 7 days away from when she died. Rogers urged the jury to reject any notion that Samantha could have tied the complex knot used to hang her from the garage door, branding the defense absolute rubbish.
That's a good point. If she doesn't know how to tie the knot.
Right. Exactly.
And you know he does. Like, yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah. Rogers said, this was not a suicide. Samantha Fraser did not kill herself after being assaulted so extensively by the accused. It was a cold and brutal murder, and it was Adrian Basham who did it. And even after this intense reasoning to believe Basham would murder Samantha, the prosecution added yet another motive that he may have had, and it's a tale as old as time, and it's that Basham was jealous.
Yeah. He can't handle something that he wants. That's enjoying their life and not giving him a second.
Yeah. And I assume they arrived at this point due to Basham's behavior with Samantha and others, his evidence of family violence, and his known aggression issues surrounding Samantha's movements. I couldn't find it confirmed anywhere, but I did read that Samantha believed, before she was murdered, she was said to have believed that Basham was tracking her phone.
God, that's such a scary thing.
Yeah, I know. Like, everywhere you go, everything you do, this poor woman must be living in so much fear. She can't do anything without him.
Yeah.
Looming over
Especially
her.
when you've gone through the process of, like, getting a new phone and a new phone number, which you said that she had done, and then still thinking that. Like, that's so intense.
Yeah. She still believed that he was tracking her. Crown Prosecutor Rogers told the jury that there was, quote, no way on earth Samantha would have committed suicide and abandoned her young children. She was a loving mother, loved and devoted to her children, Rogers said. She went on to say, quote, this was a staged suicide by the accused, with the nice touch of the knocked-over stepladder very close to the hanging body, end quote.
Yeah, just based on everything you've described with her character, it really seems like she is a fighter, and that suicide doesn't fit that part of her personality in this situation.
Right, and the friend base that she had, so many friends and her young children, it just doesn't, it ain't it for me. But,
well, and I understand the argument of people saying, well, you never know what's going through somebody's head, and I understand that, but I feel like she's telling her friends so much that part of it isn't as heavy as it could be on somebody else because of everything else she's open about with her friends.
Yeah. And now I have to jump up on my soapbox again. As I often say, I understand that defense attorneys are bound by an oath to provide a zealous defense for their client per the American Bar Association, and I respect that. The situation is much the same in Australia. Your defense team is required to advocate for you. However, it would be a lie if I said that I respected or believed their case. According to the defense, quote, we submit Mr. Basham left the garage at Seagrove Way when Samantha Fraser was still alive. Nothing has changed since this was raised when we first addressed you way back when. It is a possibility that we submit is reasonable and cannot be excluded from the evidence. The only possible explanation then for the death of Samantha Fraser is suicide. End quote. I have a lot of problems with this, as I'm sure you've all expected. I have a lot of problems with this. Firstly, I'm going to start with the familiar way with which the defense speaks to the court. Like they've been reading a storybook and everything is the same as way back when. Like this is some fairy tale. I think it's incredibly inappropriate to speak in that matter in court.
It's almost like flowery.
It's floral language, it's familiar language, and that's what I was going to say. I loathe when anyone speaks to me with a level of familiarity that they have not yet earned. And I think it's so gross that a lawyer would address the court like he's reading a book to his book club.
Yeah, it makes me feel uncomfortable, like listening to it. It just seems, and maybe like obviously going into this as like an opening statement, the jury doesn't know what we currently know. But it still, I think, would feel weird, and I wouldn't like it as a jury member.
Yeah, this isn't Tuesday Book Club. We're talking about the murder of a young woman with young children. And I want to highlight that, again, they do not defend their client in regards to Samantha's injuries. So, are you saying your client caused those injuries, then left her there? Because if he did, then Basham is minimally guilty of the involuntary manslaughter of Samantha.
Honestly, I think that is the best defense they could offer.
Me too.
Without it coming off as he is a beyond terrible person. Like, I think that is, because, you know, the moment he denies it and then they show all of this evidence, his DNA under her fingernails, his DNA on the rope, you know, going into that, if he says he's not guilty, he wasn't there, he's going to be demolished in court.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the only option they have, I feel like, to address it.
Yeah, I feel like it's the only option they have, and I am going to rip it to shreds. Because
I don't like it, but, like, I understand why they went with it.
He's minimally guilty of involuntary manslaughter because
yes.
I looked it up. The judicial system of New South Wales website lists 2 categories of involuntary manslaughter at common law. 1, manslaughter by unlawful or dangerous act. 2, manslaughter by criminal negligence. Manslaughter by unlawful and manslaughter by an unlawful and dangerous act occurs where the accused causes the death of the deceased by a voluntary act that was unlawful and dangerous. A dangerous act being one that a reasonable person in the position of the accused would have appreciated was an act that exposed another person to a risk of serious injury, which was established in an earlier Australian court case.
That sounds very, very similar to the States in that.
Yes, exactly. And the second form of involuntary manslaughter in the Australian system is more intended for those who commit murder basically by accident. And I think most of us can agree this was no accident by Basham. I ask this, the reason I ask this is because the alternative to what the defense presents, like, the alternative, are you saying that Samantha caused 41 individual blunt force injuries to herself?
Yeah, like that doesn't make any sense. And this is
either one of those two things happened. Either he's guilty of her manslaughter because he beat the shit out of her and left her to die, or 2, she was there alone and did it to herself.
Well, no, their argument is kind of like the I don't remember any of their names. The girl who was texting her boyfriend and he had killed himself based on what she was saying to him and her encouragement. That's basically what they're trying to get at here, I feel like. Like, yes, I beat her, I hurt her, but it was her own choice to kill herself. I wasn't involved in that. And obviously, like, no way. Like, you did this.
Yeah.
But that's what it seems like they're trying to do. And not doing a good job of it. But I think that's what they're trying to get at with this.
Yeah, I just don't think they're doing a very good job.
They're not, because it's not true.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a layperson, and I picked it up right away. We're like, what are you trying to say to me, buddy? And the last issue I have is, of course, the flagrant confirmation bias of the defense stating, quote, the only possible explanation for the death of Samantha Fraser is suicide, end quote.
Yeah, I don't like that.
That is like the definition of confirmation bias. Like,
well, that's what they're supposed to do. Like, that's kind of a typical closing, ending to an opening arguments. But it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah. It fills me with so much anger the way the defense stated this case. Though I suppose they had little to go on, as Adrian Basham was clearly a gigantic piece of shit predator who they had to help.
Yeah, it's like the defense counsels, they're just dealing with what they got, and this is the best that they have the ability to give because of that.
Yeah. And like I said before, this has come around. The defense also had to contend with the fact that Adrian Basham had been seen on Phillip Island in the days leading up to Samantha's murder. The home where Samantha was staying was described to the jury as, quote, a fortress, though the prosecution clarified that the house, quote, was more fortified, for want of a better word. There was no means of access at all to the house by the would-be burglar, fortified by pieces of timber on the window tracks and door tracks.
Wow.
I can also testify to this, as this is how we used to lock our back door. And if you're ever missing a key or you have an unlockable window, something like that, please find a piece of wood. It doesn't even have to be the perfect measurements, and put it in the sliding track, and that'll block your window from being pulled up or your door from being opened.
But like doing that for every window and door, wow.
Mm-hmm. Every window and
like
door.
it works. It does exactly what you need it to, but yeah, that's a lot.
And Basham was not only spotted on Phillip Island, but he appears in CCTV footage of the home where Samantha was living. So he's
like clearly
yeah,
in person stalking her.
Yeah, he's lurking around her home, and that's why I said when you mentioned the footage from before, why you might not have seen him like the way, because there's multiple, there's multiple different ones, and you could have seen the one where he is lurking outside her home. It's insane.
He did kind of look like he was lurking, but he did have like the hood up and the hands in the pockets.
And even more damning, Basham's own counsel, a Mr. Halfin, admitted in court that Basham had caused his wife some, quote, nasty injuries. He went on to minimize his client's actions, saying, quote, there is no doubting that Mr. Basham conducted himself poorly from time to time and on a number of occasions. Take, for instance, the fact that by his very own admission, he assaulted Miss Fraser. End quote. So you're saying he's guilty. That's what being guilty is.
Yeah. I'm like processing this. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Also, conducting yourself poorly from time to time and on a number of occasions is the most lawyerly way I have ever heard consistently observed abuse described.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, if you said that your child conducted themselves poorly from time to time and on a number of occasions, you would probably be like, I'm about to pull my hair out. I need to hire a nanny. Or like
right.
I just don't understand how that is helpful at all. Why would you say that?
Well, that's like you using that example of like with a child. Okay, that sounds like they throw a temper tantrum every once in a while. Like that puts it so mildly.
Yeah. Yeah, like, it's from time to time on multiple occasions. Like, Halfin spoke to the jury defending Basham, telling them that Basham was not to be judged on his alleged bad behavior leading up to Miss Fraser's death. He said, quote, members of the jury, you don't have to like Mr. Basham. That's not what this case is about, end quote.
Hey, at least he's saying it.
It's sure good that it isn't, because none of us like him. Heads up on that one.
Yeah, none of us like him. And it's not about you. It's about the things that you've done to somebody else.
Right. It's about the fact that all of this testimony is evidence proving that you have brutally murdered your wife. So he's damn sure lucky it's not about liking him. And Halfin, he went on to, in my opinion, further make his client out to be the monster he was by saying, quote, you might think Samantha Fraser was a very nice person, and that's understandable. But keep that thought out of the equation. You must judge with your heads and not your hearts. End quote.
But no.
Now we're telling the jury that an admitted abuser wasn't a good person and none of us like him, but that we should instead turn our focus on the victim of the crime and judge her?
Yeah, it's like, okay, you need to take into account that she is a nice person because of how she's treating him in return with how he's abusing her.
Right, judge her with heads and not hearts. And I'm sorry to step up on my soapbox again on this episode, but this is truly one of the wildest examples of Darvo I have ever heard.
I'm so glad you brought that up because this whole time I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I want to break down the acronym, but I don't know it.
No,
so I'm so glad that you did.
Like I told you, Darvo is typically used with narcissists. That's why when Sam and I were talking before, I told her that the narcissism thing would come back, because this is a pattern that narcissists tend to follow. And in my opinion, this defense totally used. And so we'll share a little bit here. Darvo is a reaction that perpetrators of wrongdoing, such as sexual offenders, may display in response to being held accountable for their behavior. Some researchers indicate that it is a common manipulation strategy of psychological abusers. The acronym stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So we have a denial in the not guilty plea.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing quite clearly here how the defense is attempting to reverse the victim and the offender.
Yes.
And we're about to see some of the defense's attack element of Darvo. Mr. Halfin went on to describe to the jury that Samantha Fraser had spoken to a new boyfriend about having suicidal thoughts back in 2017. First, I want to say that this crime happened in 2018. So what, quote, new boyfriend would Samantha have had?
Yeah, I was trying to, like, put the math in my head there, where I'm like,
yeah,
wait.
It don't math right. That math don't math right.
Yeah, like, and she also clearly stated to her friend earlier that she hadn't been with anybody when she got that STD.
Yes. She admitted alone to a friend that she had not been intimate with anyone but Basham for their relationship. So that includes 2017. And what is this boyfriend's name and his whereabouts? Why is he not testifying to the statements Samantha allegedly made?
Yeah. When she's made it to no one else and been so open about her issues to her friends.
Right. This apparently just slipped through. You know, where Halfin offers no background on that, simply going on to say, quote, the fact that she considered taking her own life in 2017 should not be lost in the overall equation or the possibility of suicide at another time, in this case, 1 year later. And I'm confused by this statement, Mr. Halfin, because Samantha had prior suicidal thoughts, which are quite common. Georgetown Behavioral Center says, quote, while the fleeting thought about suicide is something that everyone has probably experienced at some point in their lives, more frequent thoughts about suicide are a reason to be concerned. Also, according to Georgetown Behavioral Center, quote, suicidal thoughts can pass through your mind very quickly without becoming an obsession, end quote. So because she had these very common intrusive thoughts of suicide and confided in someone about them, she deserved to be admittedly brutally assaulted by your client? I'm very confused, Mr. Halfin.
Yeah, and I think that's a really well said statement, and obviously Georgetown Behavioral Center, they obviously know what they're talking about. But just that suicidal thoughts can pass through your mind very quickly without becoming obsession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is like, okay, yes, she very, very easily could have said this to a friend in 2017.
Yeah, could have happened.
But I think more commonly than not, that's probably a lot of people's experiences who have not had the serious suicidal thoughts before.
Right. And yes, it's very common in all of us. And yeah, I'm just very confused that because nah, that ain't it, Halfin.
Yeah, see, like, I was willing to, like, say, like, okay, he's doing the best with what he got. This isn't it.
No,
Like,
this ain't it.
this is
And
not the best. He could have gone in a different route that still isn't going to be
right,
good,
right,
but
and
not this.
it's about to get worse because Halfin went on to talk out of his literal ass when he said that Basham's previous threats made after the breakdown of his marriage, quote, "We submit that his bark is without bite," end quote.
Obviously not. You're already admitting to the fact that he hit her 41 times. That's not true, clearly.
The sheer, undiluted,
Like, this makes me really angry.
Yeah, the sheer, undiluted, unhinged statement that a man who you have admitted harmed his wife and mother of his children wasn't someone likely to follow through with a threat is laughable to me. And
Like, I'm angry that I'm laughing, but it's just
yeah,
like, it's so ridiculous that it's like,
it's ridiculous.
it's hard not to.
The absolute sheer whole grain idiocy. You gotta be kidding me. And again, it also gives you another example of things Kelly hates: the familiarity with the court, the cavalier choice of words, the fairy tale like quality that he's trying to cast around this actual demon of a man, that his bark had no bite. Like, get out of here.
Like, you're admitting that it does.
Yeah. Like you just said, they're admitting he hit her 41 times. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Yeah, that bothers me.
Yeah. Halfin stated to the jury there was no evidence indicating Basham made a threat to Miss Fraser in 2018. Quote, "In the context of the intervention order proceedings, he has never admitted to behaving towards Samantha Fraser in any improper way, and there has never been a court finding of wrongdoing." However,
It's because you didn't let it get there.
I was going to say, however, Mr. Halfin, I submit that you have admitted in open court that your client, quote, "caused his ex-wife nasty injuries." Quote, "By his very own admission, he assaulted Miss Fraser, and that he, quote, conducted himself poorly from time to time and on a number of occasions." So, Mr. Halfin, does that not imply a threat to Samantha's well-being?
Yeah, like, you haven't been found in court finding of any wrongdoing.
Right.
You literally didn't let it get there. One more week.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, you would have been.
Yeah, exactly. It's because you thought you could get out of it by committing an even worse crime.
That just seems like such a terrible excuse for a lawyer to come up with. Like,
it's awful.
your client is on trial for killing his wife so she won't testify against him on rape allegations.
Right.
Like, what does that say to the jury?
Right. What is the matter with, like that? I read that and I was like, what is the matter with this man? I just want to talk to him. Mr. Halpern, I have questions. I just want to talk.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Luckily, Justice Leslie Taylor, whose title is equivalent to the judge in a jury trial here in America, was of the opinion that Basham had likely surprised Samantha as she was sitting in the driver's seat of her car. Justice Leslie Taylor stated that Basham had waited for more than 2 hours in the garage for her to return home. She said to Basham, quote, "You intended and planned for Ms. Fraser to die. Her last conscious moments would have passed in terror. You made some attempt to stage the scene as a suicide. You still maintain a palpable fiction that she's responsible for her own death." She went on to say, quote, Miss Fraser lived in abject fear of you, both during the relationship and after you had separated. She told friends and professionals she was terrified of you. Your crime was objectively heinous. It was the ultimate act of family violence. End quote.
It's well said.
Yep.
Like, it's just so frustrated with all of this.
10 out of 10. Yeah. Also, it should be noted that as Justice Taylor is giving him a searing dissent of his actions, Basham sat quietly in his stupid white shirt and his stupid chino pants, stupidly shaking his head at times as Justice Taylor spoke. What?
Wow. And my thought very much aligns with Leslie Taylor, because when you said that she had the injuries as if her neck was twisted, I think that could be his first attack on her. That he then continued. Like, right. That seems like he surprised her.
Yeah.
And that she had no idea that was coming, and that likely wouldn't happen if she's face to face in a conversation with him.
You're right. I didn't think about that. Yeah. Ugh. Samantha's friends and family poignantly chose to wear white ribbons to Basham's sentencing hearing. The prosecution urged Justice Taylor to look into the facts of the case, adding that Mr. Basham has shown no remorse for the killing. The group audibly gasped as the Supreme Court of Victoria ordered Samantha's estranged husband, Adrian Basham, to serve at least 30 years behind bars. It took the jury less than 2 days to find the 46-year-old Basham guilty of the crime of murdering Samantha Fraser in 2017. When handing down the justifiably hefty sentence, Justice Leslie Taylor said to Basham that he had executed Samantha when she found the courage to defy him.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's a good use of words.
And one of the saddest parts is, as her father reacted to his sentence, Samantha's daughter watched, red-eyed and stony-faced, as her father was given his sentencing for killing her mother. And she's now a teenager, but Fraser's eldest daughter said that nothing would compare to the damage Basham had done to her and her family's lives.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. She stated, quote, "He murdered my mom. He took Sammy's life, and in doing so, destroyed so many others."
Yeah, he took away his own family.
Yeah,
he ruined his own family.
He destroyed this. And as he was leaving court, this real live asshole had the balls to look back at his daughter and linger for a moment. Fortunately, she was surrounded by family and friends.
Like, if you do feel any bit of remorse, like if you do, I'm not going to say he doesn't in this specific moment, then like you have to realize that everything that you did ruined it all.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to own what you've done to your children. You've ruined these 3 young babies who did nothing wrong, had their mother and their father just taken from them because you did this. You destroyed this. Like,
yeah.
And Trevor Fraser, Samantha's father, who is now primary caregiver for his grandchildren, said that justice had been served. However, he also said, quote, "It's been a long and drawn-out process."
Yeah, but I'm glad he feels like justice has been served. That's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Samantha's friends would speak out as well, saying they, quote, "mostly wanted to remember Sam, but that they welcomed Basham's sentence." I think they sum it up very well when they go on to say, quote, "We hope it's a strong benchmark of sentencing for family violence offenders." Yeah,
this should be something that this high of a sentence, which
exactly.
I don't know the Australian justice system as much, and how high this is in comparison to a lot of other murder sentences. But 30 years is a lot.
Yeah.
And in the
Yeah.
States, you could easily get 30 years for a murder. You can also get a lot more than that. Like, just depends on where you are. But that's a lot of time. He's,
Yeah.
what, you said he's in his early 40s? So he's going to be in his
Mid
70s when he gets out?
40s. Yeah, mid 40s. Yeah, he'll be in his 70s, mid 70s when he and I think that's just a really good thing. Like, you want that strong benchmark there. That way stuff like this doesn't have to happen to people, you know?
Exactly.
And I feel so bad for all of them involved, including Legia Matthews, who elaborated that the sentence was, quote, a good result under the circumstances, after what she called a, quote, pretty intense period of more than 4 years. She said in full, quote, I feel him getting life. Look, it's never going to be long enough, really. Sam's never going to be able to live her life, and we all got a life sentence when we have to live without her. She went on and said, despite that, it just means we feel a bit safer with him off the streets, and hopefully it's a bit of a deterrent for other people that the maximum sentence is out there.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, too. To make it like, this is the real examples. People can see what happened.
Yeah, it's out there. It happens. It happened. And Legia also shared, we have started a foundation that is Change for Sam, that is helping to end family violence. That's the only real positive that I can see, making a positive out of the worst negative ever. I try to block the horrors, but you can't block it completely. Sam will always be in our hearts regardless of what happened, end quote.
Yeah, it just sounds like she had really great friends who, even in
Yeah.
her death, really want to like take what she gave them and try to help give to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And to wrap this puppy up, we'll just give you one more taste of my opinion of Adrian Basham. With time already served, Basham will be eligible for parole in 2050. I hope he rots where he is. And we can take small comfort in knowing that according to news.com.au, as of right before his sentencing, Basham is a, quote, marked man in the prison system and was placed into protective custody after he was assaulted and threatened, according to his lawyer. The lawyer speaking on his behalf before his sentencing said he was having a, quote, difficult time in prison. He more specifically stated, quote, he's a despised prisoner. There's been threats to him and assaults. There's a perception he's a marked man, end quote.
Sounds like he hasn't changed at all.
Exactly. And
Wow.
yeah, don't nobody like you even in prison.
Right.
None of us like you, Adrian. So that's my thoughts. Sam, do you have any thoughts on this crazy, wild one?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I think you heard a lot of them throughout.
It's a wild one, right?
Yeah. Like, it's so frustrating because everyone did the right thing except for him. Like, all of her friends seemed fantastic and really stood up for her when she needed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
were there
he
for
just...
her.
Yeah, and they went to see therapists and...
They did everything.
Tried the things that need to happen to try to remedy it. And so the final outcome was divorce.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it needed to go.
Right. And yeah, and it just seems, like everybody tried everything. And this man still decided that his way was the only way it was going to be. And like he said, if he couldn't have her, nobody could.
Yeah, God, it's just so awful.
Mm-hmm. So another thing we'll do is we will link the Change for Sam Foundation in our notes as well. I've got that
Yes,
down.
definitely.
And that's my tale to tell today.
Oh, well, thank you for bringing it forward, as angry as it made me. And thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok at HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutthiscase@gmail.com. We'll talk to you later.